High Admiral Zexkar clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the surveillance reports from Sector 7739. The small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star had finally caught the Confederation's attention, and not in a good way. "These humans are becoming troublesome," he muttered to his aide, a thin-limbed Vortakian named Chill. "Look at this data. 50 years ago, they barely had chemical rockets. Now they have fusion drives and orbital shipyards." Kill's large eyes blinked rapidly as he scanned the holographic display. The progression was indeed alarming. The humans had gone from splitting atoms to building crude starships in less than a century. By galactic standards, this was impossibly fast. "Should we classify them as a potential threat, Admiral?" Kill asked. Zexkar's laugh was a harsh, buzzing sound. "Threat? These primitives? They haven't even left their home system yet. No, Kill. This is simply a case of uncontrolled development. Like a virus that spreads too quickly for its own good. The Galactic Confederation had ruled over 3,000 star systems for nearly 10,000 years. They had seen species like humanity before, young races that showed promise but lacked wisdom. The secret to galactic peace was simple: keep everyone at roughly the same technological level, advanced enough to contribute to the Confederation, but not advanced enough to challenge it. "What do our xenobiologists say about their psychology?" Zexkar asked. Kill brought up another file. "Standard mammalian aggression patterns, but within acceptable ranges. They fight among themselves frequently, which actually makes them easier to manage. Their governments are fragmented, no unified planetary authority. The analysis suggests they would submit to Confederation oversight within a standard year if properly motivated. Zexkar savored the word. The Confederation had many ways to motivate unruly species. Economic pressure usually worked. Technological restrictions were effective too. But sometimes a more direct approach was needed. He studied the tactical display showing Earth's orbital infrastructure. 3 large space stations, dozens of smaller ones, and nearly 100 ships of various sizes. It wasn't much by Confederation standards, but it represented decades of human effort and trillions of their primitive currency units. "How many ships would we need to disable their space capabilities?" he asked his tactical officer, a 4-armed Nexilian called Torv. Torv's multiple hands danced over his console. 6 destroyers would be sufficient, Admiral. Their weapons are crude kinetic projectiles and early-stage energy beams. Our shields could handle their entire fleet simultaneously. And casualties? Minimal on our side. As for the humans, Torv paused. The orbital stations are heavily populated. Civilian workers, their families. The shipyards employ several 100,000 individuals. If we target the infrastructure directly, I didn't ask for a moral evaluation, Torv. I asked for numbers. Estimated human casualties would be between 50 and 70,000, depending on shift rotations and evacuation procedures. Zexkar nodded approvingly. It was a significant number for the humans, but negligible by galactic standards. The Confederation had suppressed species before. Sometimes you had to break a few eggs to maintain order. "What's our justification?" Kill asked. "Even routine operations required proper documentation, uncontrolled technological development posing a potential threat to regional stability," Zexkar replied without hesitation. "Standard Form 77B. File it under preventive maintenance." The irony wasn't lost on him. The humans had no idea they were being watched. They certainly had no idea their rapid progress had been deemed unacceptable by a galactic government they didn't even know existed. They were about to be punished for the crime of being too successful too quickly. 3 days later, Admiral Zexkar stood on the bridge of the Confederation destroyer Righteous Purpose as it dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of the Sol system. 5 other destroyers materialized alongside his flagship, their sleek forms designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. "Begin the operation," he commanded. The attack was swift and clinical. The destroyers moved through space like predators, among sheep. Human sensor arrays designed to watch for asteroids and comets were completely blind to Confederation stealth technology. The orbital stations never saw death approaching. The first target was Luna Station, humanity's pride and joy. The massive rotating wheel housed nearly 30,000 people and served as the primary construction facility for their interstellar vessels. Zexkar watched impassively as concentrated plasma beams reduced it to expanding clouds of vapor and debris. Mars Orbital followed moments later. The smaller facility exploded in a brilliant flash that briefly outshone the red planet below. Emergency broadcasts filled human communication channels as panicked voices tried to understand what was happening. "Sir," Torv reported, "the humans are launching their defensive fleet." On the tactical display, dozens of human ships were accelerating toward the destroyers. Their largest vessel was barely the size of a Confederation corvette, and their weapons were laughably primitive. But they came anyway, like insects attacking a flame. "How quaint," Zexkar observed. "They think they can fight us." The human fleet lasted 18 minutes. Their ships were well built for their technology level, and their crews showed admirable courage. But courage couldn't overcome the fundamental laws of physics. Confederation shields absorbed their attacks effortlessly, while return fire carved through human vessels like a blade through tissue. The final target was Earth Orbital 1, the oldest and largest of humanity's space stations. Home to 40,000 people. It served as both a gateway to space and a symbol of human achievement. Zexkar permitted himself a moment of satisfaction as it joined its sister stations in destruction. "Mission accomplished, Admiral," Torv reported. "All primary targets destroyed. Human space capability reduced by approximately 87%. Excellent. Signal the fleet to withdraw." As the destroyers prepared to enter hyperspace, Zexkar took one last look at the blue-white planet hanging in the void. Radio transmissions from its surface painted a picture of chaos and confusion. World leaders demanding answers, military forces on highest alert, scientists frantically trying to analyze the debris for clues about their attackers. "Admiral," Kill said quietly. "What? If they attempt retaliation?" Zexkar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "With what? We just destroyed their space fleet. It will take them decades to rebuild, assuming they ever do. More likely, this demonstration will convince them to abandon their expansion efforts entirely." Destroyers vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only wreckage and questions. In the Confederation capital, the operation would be filed away as a minor success. Another primitive species properly educated about their place in the galactic order. Zexkar had no way of knowing that he had just made the worst mistake in the Confederation's 10,000-year history. He couldn't have imagined that instead of crushing human ambition, he had given it focus. The scattered competitive nations of Earth were about to discover they had something far more dangerous than individual nationalism. They were about to discover they were human. And being human, it turned out, meant something very different than the Confederation's databases suggested. President Sarah Chen stood in the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, her hands trembling slightly as she held the preliminary analysis report. Around the circular table, the faces of world leaders reflected the same mixture of shock, anger, and determination that had consumed her for the past 72 hours. "The debris analysis is conclusive," she announced to the silent room. "The weapons that destroyed our orbital stations use technology we don't understand. Energy projection systems that operate on principles we haven't even theorized yet. Hull, materials with molecular structures that shouldn't be possible." Prime Minister Viktor Petrov of the Russian Federation leaned forward. "What are you saying, Madam President, that we were attacked by aliens?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Chen's voice was steady now, the initial shock replaced by cold resolve. The wreckage contains isotopes that don't exist naturally in our solar system. The attack patterns were too coordinated for any known technology. And the precision... She paused, looking at each leader in turn. They hit exactly what they wanted. To hit. No more, no less. Chancellor Emma Richter of the European Union spoke up. The death toll stands at 68,000 confirmed, with another 12,000 missing and presumed dead. These aliens, they murdered 80,000 human beings without warning, without provocation, without even announcing their presence. The Chinese premier, Liu Wei, was studying a tablet with grim concentration. Our military analysts have reached the same conclusion. This was not an invasion. It was a demonstration. They wanted to cripple our space capabilities while leaving our planet intact. But why? Asked President Amara Okafor of the African Federation. What could we have possibly done to provoke such an attack? Dr. James Morrison, the head of NASA, cleared his throat. If I may, world leaders, I believe I know why. All eyes turned to the elderly scientist. In the past 50 years, humanity has made unprecedented leaps in space technology. We've gone from chemical rockets to fusion drives, from metal hulls to metamaterial composites, from single-planet habitation to building true starships. So maybe someone out there doesn't want us to advance that quickly. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was the first to speak. You're suggesting they attacked us to keep us primitive. I'm suggesting they attacked us because we were becoming less primitive, Morrison replied. And that means one very important thing. They're afraid of what we might become. President Chen stood up slowly. Then we need to become exactly what they're afraid of. The next 6 hours changed the course of human history. Traditional national boundaries dissolved as leaders hammered out the framework for something unprecedented. A unified global government with a single purpose. The Earth Defense Authority was born not from idealism, but from necessity. Within a week, the most brilliant minds from every nation were working together in underground facilities that had been built in secret during the Cold War. Scientists who had spent their careers competing for funding and recognition now shared everything freely. Engineers who had been developing weapons to use against each other turned their skills toward a common enemy. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a materials scientist from Tokyo, found herself working alongside Dr. Roberto Silva from São Paulo and Dr. Aisha Patel from Mumbai. 3 months earlier, they had been strangers. Now they were part of a team racing to understand alien technology. The hull fragments are incredible, Tanaka explained as she manipulated a holographic display. The atomic structure adjusts dynamically to incoming forces. It's not just armor, it's adaptive armor. Silva nodded excitedly. And look at this energy residue from their weapons. It's not plasma, it's not lasers. It's something that converts matter directly into energy at the point of impact. But the conversion is controlled, targeted, which means it can be replicated. Patel added, given enough time and resources. Time and resources were exactly what humanity had decided to provide. The global economy restructured itself almost overnight. Consumer goods became secondary priorities. Entertainment industries pivoted to supporting the war effort. Every government's primary budget item became a single line, species survival. In Detroit, General Motors retooled their factories to produce spacecraft components. In Seoul, Samsung's semiconductor facilities began working around the clock to develop new computing systems. In Mumbai, pharmaceutical companies shifted their research toward life support systems for long-duration space travel. But the most significant changes were happening in places the aliens couldn't see. Deep underground, humanity was building something that had never existed before. Industrial facilities designed to operate in absolute secrecy. Mile-long manufacturing complexes buried beneath mountains. Shipyards carved out of solid rock. Research laboratories that could survive nuclear attacks. We have to assume they're watching, General Hayes explained to her staff. Everything we do on the surface, everything they can detect from orbit has to look normal. Broken, defeated. The real work happens where they can't see it. The strategy was working. Satellite imagery showed human governments struggling to rebuild their shattered space program. Public broadcasts were filled with calls for international aid and cooperation to address the asteroid impact that had destroyed the orbital stations. The official story was holding, at least for now. Underground, the truth was very different. Captain Maria Santos stood in the cavernous Assembly Bay 7, watching as the first prototype of humanity's new starship took shape. It didn't look like anything humans had built before. The design incorporated reverse-engineered alien technology with human engineering principles that the aliens had apparently never considered. "How long until it's operational?" asked Dr. Chen, who had transitioned from president to director of Advanced Projects. 6 months for this prototype, Santos replied. But we're building 27 of them simultaneously. Different designs, different approaches. We're not putting all our eggs in one basket. The ship before them was sleek and predatory. Nothing like the bulky industrial vessels humanity had been building just months before. Its hull incorporated the adaptive materials they'd learned from alien wreckage. Its weapons were based on energy conversion principles that human physicists were only beginning to understand. But the most important innovation was invisible. Hidden throughout the ship were communication systems, sensor arrays, and data storage units that would allow it to share everything it learned with every other human vessel. The aliens had attacked humanity's space infrastructure, but they had also inadvertently given humanity something far more valuable, a reason to unite. "There's something else," Santos continued. "The psychological profiles of our volunteer crews are interesting. These people aren't motivated by exploration or scientific curiosity. They're motivated by something much more basic, which is revenge, Doctor." Chen nodded grimly. She had read the same reports. The crews volunteering for the most dangerous missions weren't professional soldiers or trained astronauts. They were civilian engineers who had lost family members in the orbital attacks, scientists whose life's work had been vaporized in an instant, ordinary people who had been transformed by the simple knowledge that someone out there considered human life expendable. "That's not necessarily a bad thing," she said. "Revenge is a powerful motivator, and unlike fear or anger, it doesn't fade with time. If anything, it grows stronger." As they spoke, similar scenes were playing out in facilities around the world. In the Urals, Russian engineers were developing new propulsion systems. In the Australian outback, joint teams were building advanced sensor arrays. In the Amazon rainforest, vast underground farms were being established to support long-duration space missions. Humanity was preparing for war, not the kind of war they had known throughout their history, limited conflicts over territory or resources. This was something different. This was a war for the right to exist as a spacefaring species. The aliens had made a calculation that a sharp, decisive blow would convince humanity to abandon their expansion into space. They had based this calculation on their understanding of primitive species, species that could be intimidated by superior technology. They had not accounted for one crucial factor: humanity's relationship with extinction. Other species, when faced with an existential threat, would submit or flee. Humans, when faced with extinction, became something else entirely. They became predators. Admiral Zexkar was reviewing routine patrol reports when his aide Kill burst into his office without announcement. The Vortakian's normally pale skin had turned an alarming shade of green. "Admiral, we have a problem. A big problem." Zexkar looked up from his data pad with irritation. "What could possibly be so urgent that you forget basic protocol?" "It's the humans, sir. They're not supposed to be doing this." Kill activated the office's holographic display, showing a tactical, Map of Confederation space. Red markers indicated the locations of recent incidents, and there were far too many of them. 15 supply convoys attacked in the past 2 months, Kill reported, his voice shaking. 4 mining operations completely destroyed. 3 slave processing facilities liberated. And sir, none of our ships have been able to catch them. Zexkar stared at the display in disbelief. That's impossible. We destroyed their space capability 18 months ago. Our surveillance shows they're still struggling to rebuild basic orbital infrastructure. That's what we thought too, sir. But look at this. The display shifted to show security footage from the attack on mining station Helix 7. Zexkar watched as sleek, predatory ships emerged from what appeared to be empty space. They moved with an efficiency he had never seen before, striking specific targets with surgical precision before vanishing again. How many ships? He asked. Unknown, sir. They appear, attack, and disappear. Our sensor arrays can't track them once they engage some kind of stealth system. But Admiral... Kill paused. The ships don't look human. What do you mean? I mean they're using our technology, hull materials that match our specifications, energy weapons based on our designs. But the engineering is different. Better. Zexkar felt his mandibles clicking involuntarily, a sign of stress he hadn't experienced in decades. Show me the weapon signatures. The next series of displays made his situation clear. The mysterious attackers were using energy conversion weapons that operated on the same principles as Confederation technology, but with improvements that shouldn't have been possible. Their targeting systems were more accurate. Their power output was higher. Their efficiency was beyond anything in the Confederation's arsenal. Sir, Kill continued, there's something else. The liberated facilities. The slaves weren't just freed. They were recruited. Recruited for what? Unknown. But we've lost contact with over 300,000 beings from various species. They've simply vanished. The communication system on Zexkar's desk chimed with an urgent priority signal. The familiar face of High Command appeared on the screen, and Zexkar could see the strain in his superior's expression. Admiral, the voice was terse and controlled. Report to Central Command immediately. We have a situation. 24 hours later, Zexkar found himself in a conference room with the highest levels of Confederation leadership. The atmosphere was tense in a way he had never experienced before. Supreme Admiral Korthon, the highest military authority in the Confederation, stood before a massive tactical display showing their entire territory. Red markers indicated recent attacks, and the pattern was becoming clear. In the past 6 months, Korthon began, we have lost more assets to unknown attackers than we lost in the entire rebellion of the Outer Rim 3 centuries ago. The attackers are systematic, intelligent, and completely invisible to our detection systems. Defense Minister Yextal, a massive Krogian whose species had never known defeat in battle, stepped forward. Our intelligence suggests these attacks are not random. The targets have been carefully chosen. Supply lines that support our expansion efforts, mining operations in contested territories, slave facilities that house our most valuable workers. And most disturbing of all, added Intelligence Director Velthara, the freed slaves are not returning to their home worlds. They are joining the attackers. Zexkar felt his stomach drop. Joining them? You mean cooperating? We mean converting, Velthara replied coldly. Every species we have civilized over the past 1,000 years is suddenly sharing intelligence about our operations, our weaknesses, our patrol routes. We are facing a coalition of every primitive species in our territory. But that's impossible, Zexkar protested. These species barely understand space travel. They have no military coordination, no unified command structure. They do now. Supreme Admiral Korthon activated a new display showing intercepted communications. The signals were encrypted with mathematical principles that Confederation computers couldn't break, but the transmission patterns told a story of their own. Coordinated fleet movements across 17 star systems, Korthon explained. resource, sharing between species that have never even met each other. Joint military operations involving technologies from dozens of different civilizations. Someone is organizing them. The humans? Zexkar said quietly. The humans, Corthan confirmed. The species you assured us would be properly motivated by a simple demonstration of superior force. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The Confederation had spent millennia maintaining control through a simple strategy. Keep potential enemies divided and primitive. Never allow them to unite. Never let them share technology. Never give them a reason to cooperate. The attack on Earth had accomplished the exact opposite of its intended goal. What do we know about their capabilities? Asked Defense Minister Yextal. Intelligence Director Velthara brought up a new series of reports. Based on debris analysis from the few engagements where we've inflicted damage, they've somehow reverse-engineered our technology and improved upon it. Their ships are faster, more maneuverable, and more heavily armed than anything in our fleet. How is that possible? Zexkar demanded. We gave them a few hull fragments and weapon residue. That's not enough to rebuild an entire technology base. Unless, Velthara said slowly, they didn't start from fragments. Unless they started from intact systems. The horrible realization hit everyone in the room simultaneously. The humans hadn't just analyzed the wreckage from their destroyed stations. They had salvaged intact technology from the attack itself. The weapon systems, Zexkar whispered. When we destroyed their stations, some of our energy beams passed through the structures without fully dissipating. The humans could have captured and analyzed the beam generators themselves. And the hull fragments contained complete molecular matrices, added Yextal. They didn't just learn what our materials were made of, they learned how to make them. Supreme Admiral Corthan turned to face the assembled leadership. We are dealing with a species that views warfare differently than any we have encountered. They don't fight for territory or resources. They don't seek to conquer or subjugate. They fight for extinction or survival with no middle ground. What do you recommend? Asked the defense minister. Total war. Immediate mobilization of the entire Confederation fleet. We end this before it spreads further. And if we fail? Corthan's expression was grim. Then we will have created the very thing our ancestors feared most when they founded the Confederation, a species capable of uniting the galaxy against us. As the meeting continued, none of the Confederation leaders noticed the small probe maintaining position just outside their detection range. The device was so advanced that it appeared to be nothing more than a piece of space debris, indistinguishable from the thousands of asteroids that drifted through the system. But deep inside its hull, sophisticated recording equipment was capturing every word, every tactical display, every strategic plan. The probe's quantum communication system transmitted this intelligence instantaneously across hundreds of light years to a hidden facility in the asteroid belt of an unremarkable star system. There, human analysts studied the Confederation's plans, with the same methodical precision their ancestors had once used to hunt mammoths. They were learning their enemies' weaknesses, their fears, their decision-making processes. The Confederation thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had stumbled onto advanced technology. They had no idea they were being systematically studied, analyzed, and outmaneuvered by creatures who had spent their entire evolutionary history becoming the most dangerous predators their planet had ever produced. The hunt was no longer just beginning. The hunt was already over. The Confederation just didn't know they were the prey yet. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her tactical display showed the systematic dismantling of Confederation Outpost Gamma 9. Around her, the crew worked with the silent efficiency that had become humanity's. Trademark. No celebration, no excitement, just cold professional destruction. Target their communication array first, she ordered. Standard protocol. The Retribution's energy weapons lanced out with surgical precision, severing the outpost's connection to the Confederation fleet. This had become humanity's signature, Move, isolate, disable, extract intelligence, then vanish. The Confederation never got warnings anymore. Their reinforcements always arrived to find empty space and scattered debris. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Chen from the sensor station, "we're detecting 1,700 life forms aboard the station. Mixed species. Looks like standard slave labor composition. Begin liberation protocols. Within minutes, smaller human." Vessels were docking with the Confederation outpost. These weren't military ships. They were purpose-built rescue and conversion platforms. Each one carried medical teams, translators, and most importantly, representatives from every species humanity had encountered. This was the strategy that had transformed the war from a simple conflict between two species into something far more dangerous for the Confederation. Every liberated slave became a teacher, sharing the weaknesses and secrets of their former masters. Every rescued species became a recruiting ground for the growing coalition. "Captain," reported the communications. "Officer, we're receiving surrender signals from the station commander." "Standard response," Vasquez replied without emotion. The standard response had been developed by human psychologists working with alien refugees. It was carefully designed to maximize the psychological impact on Confederation forces. The message was always the same, delivered in perfect Confederation standard. "This is the Human Liberation Fleet. Your facility has been designated for freedom operations. Surrender your weapons and prepare for processing. Resistance will be met with proportional force. You have 10 minutes to comply." What made the message so effective wasn't its content. It was its tone. Cold, professional, inevitable. The CO. Confederation had spent millennia projecting exactly this kind of authority over primitive species. Having it used against them was psychologically devastating. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen continued, "long-range sensors are detecting a Confederation response fleet. 12 destroyers, ETA 43 minutes. More than enough time. Vasquez turned to her executive officer. "Commander Park, begin Phase 2. Phase 2 was the part of human operations that the Confederation still didn't understand. Instead of fleeing before reinforcements arrived, the humans would often stay and fight. But they didn't fight like any military force the Confederation had ever encountered. Human ships would split into small groups and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. They would target specific systems with devastating precision: life support, navigation, weapons, leaving Confederation vessels crippled but not destroyed. The crews would then be forced to watch as human boarding parties took their ships, apart piece by piece. It wasn't just military tactics, it was psychological warfare designed to break the enemy's will to fight. "Ma'am, liberation teams report complete success. All slaves have been extracted and are requesting asylum with our fleet." "Granted. Signal the convoy to prepare for hyperspace." But today was different. Today, Captain Vasquez had additional orders that came directly from the human high command. Today, they weren't just liberating slaves and gathering intelligence. Today, they were sending a message. "Sir, the Confederation response fleet has arrived," reported Lieutenant Chen. "They're hailing us. Put them through." The main screen activated, showing the familiar form of a Confederation admiral. His mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation that human intelligence had learned to recognize. "Unknown vessels!" The admiral's voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "You are in violation of Confederation space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Captain Vasquez smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Admiral, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Human Liberation Fleet. We have completed our operations here. You are free to recover your outpost." "Human?" The admiral's eyes widened. "Impossible. We destroyed your space capability years ago." "You destroyed some orbital stations," Vasquez corrected. "You also murdered 80,000 civilians." "We remember." The transmission ended, and the human fleet began its departure. But instead of the quick hyperspace jump the Confederation expected, something different happened. "Ma'am," reported the tactical officer, "all ships are reporting ready for demonstration protocol." Vasquez nodded. The demonstration protocol had been developed specifically for moments like this. The Confederation needed to understand that their technological superiority was no longer guaranteed. Execute. What happened next would be analyzed by Confederation military strategists for months afterward. The human fleet didn't flee. Instead, they turned and engaged the Confederation destroyers in direct combat. But this wasn't the desperate last stand the Admiral expected. It was a carefully choreographed display of overwhelming technological superiority. Human ships moved through space like dancers, their adaptive hulls shifting to deflect incoming fire, while their weapons carved through Confederation shields as if they didn't exist. Energy beams that should have destroyed human vessels were absorbed and redirected. Missiles that should have crippled their engines were intercepted by defensive systems that operated faster than Confederation targeting. Computers could track. In 18 minutes, 12 Confederation destroyers were reduced to drifting hulks. Their crews were alive but helpless, watching as human ships systematically dismantled their vessels for salvage. "Admiral," Captain Vasquez's voice came over the emergency communication channel, "tell your superiors that we are no longer the species you attacked 3 years ago. Tell them that every day they continue their oppression of other species, we become stronger. Tell them that we have united every race you have ever enslaved, and we are teaching them what freedom means." The Admiral stared at his tactical display in shock. His entire fleet had been neutralized without a single human casualty. "What? What do you want?" "We want you to remember this moment," Vasquez replied. "We want you to understand that humanity doesn't forget, we don't forgive, and we don't stop." The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind wreckage and a message that would spread throughout Confederation space faster than any official communication. Humanity was no longer hiding. 3 months later, the effects of the new human strategy were becoming clear throughout Confederation territory. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were openly rebelling. Entire star systems were declaring independence. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the Confederation stable for millennia was collapsing. Supreme Admiral Corthan stood in the Central Command reviewing reports that grew worse each day. The humans weren't just fighting a war, they were systematically dismantling the foundation of Confederation society. "The economic projections are catastrophic," reported his aide. 16 major industrial systems have gone offline. Our supply chains are collapsing. The slave labor force that supports our infrastructure is either freed or in active rebellion. What about our fleet response? Ineffective, sir. Every engagement with human forces results in either heavy casualties or complete defeat. Our shipyards can't replace vessels fast enough to match our losses. Corthan studied the strategic display with growing dread. The red markers indicating human activity now covered nearly a third of Confederation space. But worse than the territorial losses was what the intelligence reports revealed about human capabilities. "They're not just winning battles," he said quietly. "They're learning from every engagement. Every ship we lose, every tactic we employ, every technological advantage we reveal, they adapt to it within weeks." "Sir, there's something else. The psychological evaluation reports from our surviving crews." Corthan reviewed the data with mounting horror. Confederation forces weren't just being defeated, they were being traumatized. Veterans who had served for decades were requesting transfers to non-combat positions. Some were refusing to engage human ships entirely. "They're breaking our military's will to fight," he realized. "This isn't just conquest. It's psychological warfare designed to destroy our capacity to resist." The communication system chimed with an urgent message from the Confederation Council. When the transmission activated, Corthan found himself looking at the worried faces of the most powerful beings in known space. "Admiral, The council speaker's voice was strained. "We need immediate recommendations. The situation is spiraling beyond our control." "The situation is already beyond our control," Corthan replied, bluntly. "We are no longer dealing with a primitive species that stumbled onto advanced technology. We are dealing with creatures who view warfare as an extension of evolution. Every battle makes them stronger. Every defeat teaches them something new." "What do you recommend?" Corthan was quiet for a long moment. "Negotiation." "Negotiation?" The council speaker's voice rose in disbelief. "With primitives!" "These are not primitives," Corthan said quietly. "These are predators. And—" Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Terra's Wrath, watching as the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled moved through hyperspace toward the Confederation capital system. Around her, the viewports showed an endless procession of ships, not just human vessels, but representatives from every species the Confederation had ever enslaved. The Krillian Empire had contributed their knowledge of Confederation shield technology. The Vegan Republic had provided detailed maps of the capital system's defenses. The Centauri Alliance had shared their expertise in energy weapons. Dozens of species, united for the first time in galactic history by a simple shared goal: freedom. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the tactical station, "final fleet count is confirmed. 12,000 combat vessels, 4,000 support ships, and nearly 3 million liberated beings ready to reclaim their freedom." Chen nodded, still staring out at the fleet. 3 years ago, she had been president of the United States, dealing with budget disputes and trade negotiations. Now, she commanded the largest military force in galactic history, preparing to end a 10,000-year-old empire. The transformation hadn't been easy. Humanity had paid a terrible price for their rapid advancement. Entire generations had grown up knowing nothing but preparation for war. Earth's population had been mobilized into the largest industrial effort in human history. Personal freedoms had been suspended in favor of species survival, but it had worked. The creatures who had dismissed humanity as primitive mammals had created something they never imagined possible: a united, technologically advanced, militarily sophisticated species with a single-minded focus on their destruction. Time to target? 47 minutes until we reach the outer defenses of the Mortal system. The Confederation capital was protected by defensive installations that had been built over millennia. Energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts, weapons platforms capable of destroying entire fleets, fortress stations manned by the elite of Confederation military forces. It would have been an impregnable defense against any known military force. But humanity had spent 3 years studying Confederation technology, tactics, and psychology. They knew exactly how to break defenses that had never been seriously tested. "Signal from the advanced scouts," reported the communications officer. "The Confederation Defense Fleet is taking position around the capital world. Estimated strength, 800 vessels, including their newest dreadnoughts. Response from High Command? Proceed as planned. Show them what they created." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Mortal system in perfect formation. For a moment, both forces simply stared at each other across the void. The Confederation defenders saw an impossibly large fleet of vessels using their own technology. The human forces saw the heart of an empire that had considered them insects. Supreme Admiral Corthan stood on the bridge of the Confederation flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the sensor readings with a mixture of awe and terror. The human fleet was larger than anything in recorded history, but more disturbing was the composition of that fleet. "Analysis confirms our worst fears," reported his tactical officer. "Those ships are using our hull materials, our energy systems, our propulsion technology. But the engineering signatures indicate improvements we can't match." "How many species are represented in that fleet?" 47 confirmed, sir. "Every major civilization we've brought under Confederation control in the past 1,000 years." Corthan closed his eyes briefly. The Confederation's strategy of divide and conquer had been turned completely against them. Instead of keeping potential enemies separated, they had given humanity a galaxy full of allies who shared detailed knowledge of Confederation weaknesses. Incoming transmission from the human fleet. The main screen activated, showing Admiral Chen's calm, professional face. Behind her, the bridge of the Terra's Wrath buzzed with quiet activity. Human efficiency had become legendary throughout the galaxy. No wasted motion, no unnecessary communication, no emotion that didn't serve a tactical purpose. Supreme Admiral Corthon. Chen's voice was polite and formal. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Liberation Fleet. We are here to discuss the terms of the Confederation's surrender. Surrender? Corthon's mandibles clicked involuntarily. We have never surrendered to anyone. The Confederation has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. The Confederation has oppressed this galaxy for 10,000 years, Chen corrected. That ends today. You cannot seriously believe you can defeat our entire military with a single battle. Chen's expression didn't change. Supreme Admiral, we're not here to defeat your military. We're here to liberate every enslaved being in, your territory and dismantle the systems that allowed your oppression to continue. Your military is simply in our way. The tactical displays on both ships showed the two fleets moving into engagement range. But instead of the chaotic rush that characterized most space battles, the human formation moved with mechanical precision. Each ship knew exactly where to be, when to fire, and how to support their allies. Admiral Chen, Corthon tried one final time. Surely we can negotiate. The Confederation is willing to discuss territorial adjustments, tribute payments, even limited autonomy for some species. The time for negotiation ended when you murdered 80,000 civilians, Chen replied. You taught us that the universe contains species who consider human life expendable. We've learned that lesson very well, the battle for the Confederation. Capital began with a demonstration that horrified every military strategist who witnessed it. The human fleet didn't charge the defensive positions or attempt to overwhelm them with superior numbers. Instead, they systematically dissected the Confederation defenses with surgical precision. Weapons platforms that had protected the capital for centuries were disabled by energy beams that penetrated their shields as if they didn't exist. Fortress stations were boarded and captured by assault teams that moved through their corridors like they had built-in blueprints. Defense fleet. Vessels found their own weapons turned against them as human cyber warfare specialists took control of their systems. This is impossible, whispered Corthon as he watched his impregnable defenses crumble. No species develops this quickly. No military force can coordinate on this scale. Sir, reported his aide, the humans are transmitting surrender terms to all remaining vessels. The terms were broadcast on all frequencies, in every language spoken by Confederation species. They were simple, non-negotiable, and completely unprecedented in galactic history. All enslaved beings will be immediately freed and provided with transportation to their home worlds or colonies of their choosing. All forced labor operations will cease permanently. All territorial expansion by force will end. The Confederation government will be dissolved and replaced by a voluntary alliance of species with equal representation. Any attempt to resist these terms will result in the complete destruction of Confederation military forces. They're not conquering us, Corthon realized with growing horror. They're dismantling us. The final battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Confederation fleet was completely destroyed, but something even more significant had occurred. The capital world's population, billions of beings from hundreds of species, had witnessed the systematic defeat of their supposed masters by the creatures they had been told were primitive animals. Admiral Chen stood in the Confederation council chambers 3 days later, addressing the assembled representatives of every species in known space. The Grand Hall that had once symbolized Confederation dominance now hosted something unprecedented, a truly representative galactic government. The Galactic Liberation Alliance, she announced, will be founded on principles the Confederation never understood, voluntary membership, equal representation, mutual defense, and most importantly, the absolute right of every species to develop according to their own potential. And humanity's role in this alliance? Asked the former Confederation. Council speaker, now stripped of authority but allowed to speak. Humanity will be one voice among many, Chen replied. We have no interest in ruling others. We've learned that forced control creates exactly the kind of resentment that destroyed your empire. But you have the largest fleet, the most advanced technology, which we will share freely with any species that requests it. The technological advancement that you tried to prevent will be available to everyone. No species will ever again be kept primitive for the convenience of others. As the council session continued, reports arrived from throughout the former Confederation territory. Slave worlds were declaring independence. Industrial systems were being converted from forced labor to free markets. Species that had been enemies for centuries were cooperating to rebuild their shattered civilizations. The transformation wasn't without problems. Some species struggled with sudden freedom after generations of oppression. Others had to learn how to govern themselves. A few attempted to establish their own mini-empires, only to discover that the human liberation fleet was as committed to preventing oppression as they had been to ending it. But the fundamental change was irreversible. The galaxy would never again accept the idea that one species could dominate all others.